better until
Stop
today.
it. No, I'd be honored, and I will allow. Amanda, please go first since you're new to the group.
Yeah, I am. So very excited. I am from the area, so I never knew that this place was over here. So really glad I get to meet you today. My name is Amanda Oliveira. I am the program manager for partnership and training with Give an Hour, and really excited to share the space and talk about peer support and the things that Give an Hour can do today. So.
If you could speak just a little louder to catch the mic, that would be great.
And what's wonderful is that Amanda and I have never met in person before. So as the nature of Give an Hour as a nationally based nonprofit, this is the first opportunity we've had to meet in person. So thank you very much for giving us that opportunity. It's delightful. Oh, and so for my role at Give an Hour, I think I've probably already talked a little bit about that, but I came to Give an Hour more as an end user, looking to help develop a product after the fall of Afghanistan and the things that myself and my peers were going through at the time, really under a lot of stress induced by moral injury and kind of trying to deal with the immediate shock of what's going on in this country that I just invested almost my entire military career in. And so for the folks that were helping with the evacuation, there was a lot of burnout, a lot of just heavy stuff, emotions going on that most of us didn't know how to even talk about because it was all ongoing. So reached out to Give an Hour to look to develop a peer support program for that cohort, and the rest is history. I became an intern and finished my MSW with them. So without further ado.
It's been so great to work with Rebecca and get her insight and her amazing perspective on all these things. So yeah, I don't know how much everyone in the room might know about Give an Hour, so I'll just kind of quickly from the ground up describe what we're here for today. We're a national mental health nonprofit, and we're a remote company, like Rebecca had mentioned, but we work all over the place, sometimes in person and sometimes virtually to connect with folks. And originally, when we were formed almost 20 years ago, it was really strictly for one-to-one connections with professional providers, mental health providers. And so they would join this kind of shadow network and give an hour of their time every week for a year as part of their way of giving to the community. Mostly we were serving people in the military and veteran community. And over time, we've expanded and added some new things and some other products that we refer to them as products sometimes. And one of those is kind of training and customized learning that we do with organizations or special interest groups. And sometimes that is in the form of peer support, but we kind of flex and work in different ways with different populations. But our main focus is to provide low barrier access to mental health care. And if that comes in alternative forms to traditional therapy, then we embrace that. And we're really just trying to build this and empower people to take charge of their own healing journey. So a lot of the work that we do is focused on the individual, and it's it takes into account the experiences that we each have of trauma. Stars that we just want a society where everyone is well equipped to, like I said, take charge of their healing and kind of lead their own individual journey to recovery.
Mm-hmm. And y'all met Sean White.
Sean Moore.
Sean Moore. God, what's us with names getting everything wrong? So Sean Moore, one of the wellness ambassadors, is here with the Elizabeth Gold Foundation. So we also have other programs where really it's our goal is to help sort of not normalize the discussion on mental health and the fact that it's a part of everybody's life, and so that's a big push that we're trying to make as well.
For sure. So just to kind of dive in, the thing that we want to focus on today is all around peer support. And the reason that peer support is something that we lean heavily at Given Hour is because of the problems that you can see on the screen there. So the problem that we're referring to is the availability and the access to mental health care services in general. So we have one mental health care professional available for every 350 people in need of mental health care services in the US. So a huge tip of the scale. And in knowing that, we realize that there have to be other ways that we can intervene and offer support to individuals so that they can heal and recover and then be able to push their own wellness out to the world again. Add to that, specifically in the military community, there can be extreme backlogs or obstacles to accessing services, qualification processes, and then this widespread, but we definitely hear about it a lot in the military community. And so a lot of times wellness goes unaddressed or completely overlooked altogether. And when we stack on top of that problem, we also have what Given Hour refers to as human-made trauma. Has this come up in any conversations before?
I might have blurted it out the other day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we Given Hour uses the term human-made trauma to refer to traumatic experiences that are caused or perpetuated by human beings. And so we take a trauma-informed approach to all of the work that we do, and we teach that approach to other people and to organizations so that they can apply it to the work they do. And in that way, we are respecting and embracing everyone's unique experience and helping them to work through their challenges in a nuanced way. And that is definitely different from what we see in the typical mental health model.
I just want to interject too with regard to the nuanced aspect is that we can look at the military population as having sort of a broad and generalized sort of disorders when it comes to the way that we deal with mental health as an institution. But as you obviously know, every installation has its different set of environmental influences. And so I think a really good example of that is we've had two different installations come to us looking for customized support services via training for peer support at their respective locations. And so the issues that are going on at, say, Fort Bliss with regard to veteran suicide look a lot different from what's going on at, say, Fort Myer. And so Fort Myer, you've got the old guard there, you've got the everything is predominantly kind of like the showcase type of soldier where you're at Arlington National Cemetery. They're, always on, performance. And so they have this high level of stress regarding that. There was a lot of behavioral issues and DUIs and kind of soldiers wilding out. And so in order to get that under control, their leadership reached out to us to try and develop a peer support program customized towards that population. Whereas in Fort Bliss, it's very isolated. It's generally speaking a much younger population. Whereas if you're in the old guard, you're more senior, you've had more experience. And so I'm just using that as an example to speak to what I really love about Given Hour is that we really try to take the time to analyze the particular situation, the particular environment, the issues that are going on there, and not just, deliver this like generalized support that you see sometimes.
So we're trying not to be discouraged by all those problems and come up with solutions for them. And so one of those solutions, like we've been mentioning, is peer support. So we think of, what do you think of just in general when you hear the term peer support? Does anything spring to mind automatically, or do you have a vision of what that is?
The VA has a specific peer support program. So VA employs other veterans who've gone through various recovery issues and or certain traumas. And they employ them at anywhere between like a GF4 and a GF9 level to basically help to run individual one-on-one and or groups within certain recovery substructures, particularly within facilities for drug and alcohol rehabilitation.
That's
Well, I'm thinking of peer support as an enlightened witness. Somebody who's been through
Mhm.
something, or someone said, the other term, but, somebody who's been through, has kind of, is still on their journey in recovery, but is in a place ready to help others.
Mhm. So the lived experience
Lived
and,
experience.
and, you know, and then they speak the language.
Yes.
They can, empathize in a very honest way. And so I think understanding that that's a big barrier for veterans in general is that like, I don't want to have to try to explain this to you because it's really complicated and you're not going to get it. Like that whole dynamic is kind of, broken down through having a peer support like relationship.
We love that term, like.
I like that too.
You can say that. And you know, in exactly what Rebecca's talking about, this is a problem that we see with individuals who even do get connected with licensed professionals for kind of traditional therapy, is that sometimes you're sitting across from a person or you're on the screen with a person who is credentialed to be able to support you, but if they haven't had your unique experience, it might be really hard to connect with them. Or, I mean, there's definitely instances where the professional is just not even emotionally equipped to hear the story and to be able to offer you support. I hear those stories too, that sometimes they're overwhelmed by it and say, I don't know how to help this person, or, you know, I'm having a really strong reaction. And then even though you are taking advantage of the system that's been put in place for you, it might not be the right fit. And that's actually one of the things that Give an Hour does, is that we try to match people with the right type of provider, but also the right type of service. And so peer support access quite a bit because of that shared lived experience. And the I feel like it kind of removes the hierarchy of you're a professional on a pedestal that's going to give me direction and advice, and I need to listen and take it, you know, kind of like you're mentoring me in a sense. And that goes away in peer support because everyone's on an even plane. So it also kind of increases comfortability, I would say.
If y'all are clued in, I did a peer support group last night on the basis of moral injury in a room full of veterans, and something that came out of someone's mouth, like verbatim, was, I think it's easier to talk to strangers about my issues than it is for me to talk to my own wife.
Right.
And what was interesting is that the rest of the group would comment back and forth, and he said, you know, but what's interesting is that you guys aren't strangers. I know we've never met before, but I can come into this conversation, start sharing my experience, and I already know you're not going to judge me. You're going to know what I'm talking about, even if you weren't there or, you know, what have you. And so, I mean, it comes straight from the veteran's mouth more often than not. And I think the other thing is when we think about rapport building, it's an automatic, right? Like with veterans in the same room, they can shoot the shit and talk about, speak the language, the acronyms and all that stuff. So it's a lot easier for us to open up when we feel that level of comfort. Whereas with a clinician, I mean, I don't know from firsthand experience, but I would think that it takes a little bit of time to get that individual to feel comfortable or to bring that guard down. And a lot of times we're coming in there with anger and it's projected. And so I think personally that it's a really good introduction into formalized therapy because it gets that person comfortable in an environment where they're talking about their things, and then they can think more open-minded about, okay, maybe what might that next step be that I'm going to take.
So it sounds like everybody in the room has a similar vision of peer support as something that is a give and take, and it's there for emotional support and for uplifting the people around you. But I think we're touching on already this idea of the concept of peer support versus the reality of it, because it's something that really is it's very much in our face. We see in these specific populations, Give an Hour works with specific populations that are affected by certain types of human-made trauma. In the military and veteran community, something that we see is this really big difference in what peer support actually is in the experience versus what someone might anticipate that it is, or maybe has been told that it is. I mentioned to Rebecca the other day that once upon a time, I had a vision of what peer support was based on things I had seen in media when I was growing up, where you're kind of in this big audience and everyone's sitting theater style. And when it's time to talk, you have to stand up and go to the front, stand at a podium and make a speech. And then it's open for people to come in and kind of criticize what you said or challenge what you said. And I had that idea many years ago that that was what peer support experience was like. And I came into it for the first time as an adult, thinking that it was going to be something I had to really work hard to get through. And of course, the experience itself firsthand was completely different. So we really do come to these situations with preconceived ideas. But in this case, there's I think there's a big difference with that concept and reality too.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience over the last year and some change, I've never seen one instance of somebody decide to comment on someone sharing a place of vulnerability with any kind of criticism. It's always been, I know how you feel, I've been there, I've done that, you know, and it's always very affirming. It comes from a place of like, you know, I think when someone's used to like their normal baseline is to walk around the earth angry and, you know, hyper vigilant, and then they're given this window of opportunity to be kind to somebody else because they're like, oh, I totally like that lands for me. And all I have to do is say like, I get you. And they know that that's going to help somebody else that has this very like reciprocal, you know, experience where you think you show up to peer support for your own well-being. But what you ultimately end up doing is being able to encourage somebody else. And that's really where the benefit comes from.
Segue. And so again, just going back to that idea of trauma-informed peer support, we shorten that to TIPS a lot of times, is, you know, at the core of it is we're trying to provide a safe space and connection, empathy, and then also this opportunity to motivate. So it's not just about coming and opening up. It's also about how do I move beyond this, or how do I move forward, or how do I make you know, change my circumstances if that's what is important to me to do. And you end up kind of organically doing that for one another, and it emerges in, you know, really unforced way. Resource sharing is a big part of it too, that in practical sense, but sometimes it's also in just, you know, hey, have you ever heard of this book or read this great article the other day? Or I participated in this webinar. So many different things, and people can bring those, you know, little tiny things even to the group and to the exchange, and it can really make a light bulb go off. So when we're talking about peer support and creating that environment, we always think about kind of these key ingredients and the things that we're meant to accomplish through it, and it always comes back to these types of things.
I would just, yeah, I would double up on the resource sharing, because I think everyone should be familiar with the sea of goodwill that exists for the veteran community. Like there's endless amounts of resources that are out there for us. So any veteran that's complaining about like, I don't, you know, it's like, just Google your issue and that state, or, you know, I'm sure there's a national movement to address that thing. And so, you know, a lot of times veterans show up to that space looking for something. And so more times than not, you know, somebody's like, oh, I did this thing, I went on this retreat, this is how I filed my disability. It's just a back and forth sharing of resources where people have actually used those things themselves, so they can speak to the quality of whatever that is. And then I think the motivation piece also is really important to point out, because when you think about it, someone that shows up to a peer support group is doing it entirely on their own volition. You know, they weren't, you know, maybe they were encouraged to go, but it's like, if you can step into that space, or like, I'd rather be doing something else at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, but I'm going to log into this. I think that showing up aspect for us in the military is something very near and dear to us. And so when we get into that room and we know we're not that like, oh, there's like 5 other people, and like it motivates you in the same way that it kind of did. Like, I mean, I can speak from when I was in the service. And so that element I think is really essential.
So we're talking about all the things that peer support is. We also want to make sure that we cover the things that it isn't. Has anyone been part of forming a peer support group in the past, or kind of leading one in any capacity? Oh, okay.
Sort of. It was it's a residential treatment center for veterans and first responders, but it's a group and individual. So you've got the clinical staff, but the bottom line, pitch line is warriors helping warriors.
Okay.
Because it is a person who's just a little ahead of you,
Yeah.
but even in an inpatient setting, and then peers come back, but also while in treatment. And so it is that exactly what you said. And then we, for transition reasons, decided to put first responders with veterans because they really do have a very overlapping experience. And oftentimes one is both. A veteran is a first responder, you know what I mean? They can do that bit, and that has been shockingly successful.
I love that.
More than what we thought it would be.
And I also want to point out, so a lot of times we think that there has to be an identical match for, okay, I'm a survivor of this. But I have found personally that if there is a slight variation, or even sometimes totally contrasting, but yet that person is in the headspace to speak on that thing,
Yes.
the veteran can benefit even more because they see the similarities. And it's not just, oh, you get this because you've served in the military. And it starts to open up their mind as to like, oh, like I'm not in this world alone. Like I'm going through this transition and I can see those connections. And I love challenging that aspect of peer support.
Me too.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, so it's clear from the from that kind of structure that we're looking at peer support, that because it's not formalized in the way that a traditional mental health experience would be, which would be kind of a diagnostic, sitting in front of a licensed professional situation, which is absolutely helpful and necessary in so many cases. But if it's not been serving you, if you're not ready for it yet, then peer support provides these other elements. And again, I think it was a really good point that you made, that it could be a great starting point before you go into therapy. We're not ready yet for that. But and going into that situation might be just too much. Like, I just want to share a little bit. I just want to talk to somebody who's maybe understands. And then you sit down and someone says, here's all the things that are wrong. Here are your symptoms. Here's your diagnosis. You have time for us to take 1, 2, 3 steps for intervention. I can feel like a plot. And it would feel like a chore or a puzzle or something. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Fix that. And the peer support experience is completely different from that.
And I think too, it's not just, I don't know that they understand me and they don't know what this is like and they're telling me what I am. It's in a room of, I have this too. And so that automatic shared pain or experience lessens the like ickiness of identifying with a moral injury or PTSD or something else. And sometimes all it takes is one person in the room to say, I know, man, I was resistant to treatment as well. I didn't want to go see a counselor or whatever, but let me tell you how much of it. And so that one comment can totally change another veteran's mind because it's like real customer feedback that they will actually trust.
Yeah, and even in that setting, mental health professionals are really encouraged, and it's kind of, in some cases, it's an ethical issue. You're not supposed to share personal things about yourself and inject your life and your issues into the conversation. So it's not just that they simply don't understand or haven't been through it in every situation. They're really trying to uphold that boundary, a professional boundary, and that's not for everybody.
And that's one thing that when we go into teaching peer support, we really try to talk about self-disclosure as a thing to be aware of, is that it's helpful, very much so. But what's really great about the training aspect that that Given Hour delivers, they actually train you in facilitation of being not just a peer support, but how to run meetings. And so we talk about these principles. And so it helps that person to learn about what is active listening. I've never thought about that before. What is asking open-ended questions, and these basic tenets of like, trust me, we're not even implying that we're teaching you how to be a counselor, but think about these things and start employing them. And then that becomes self-development. That becomes professional development and mindfulness and all these other things. And what did I?
No, I was, you kind of answered my question. So in these forums, like what you did last night, it's like a Zoom.
Yep.
And you have a trained or vetted, or whatever words you're gonna use, but facilitator that kind of keeps things on
On
track.
track.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And if somebody starts to go down their rabbit hole, then they, what, pull them back?
yeah,
Cut
it's,
their
and,
mic
you know,
off?
I'm still limited in my experience, so sometimes that's hard when someone's like off in the wilderness, sharing about something that's traumatic, but, you know, I just have to like,
So you bring them back. to,
yeah,
"Hey,
I
this
have
is
to be,
our-
I have to,
gotcha."
you know, I have to say like, you know, keep my microphone on and be like, oh my gosh, that sounds so hard. And I know that there's somebody else in the room that can speak to that. So is there anyone else that, you know, wants to affirm that what this person is going through isn't a singular experience for them? And so if you can bring other people in and it's not just me like railroading them, then I find that that's like the easiest way to kind of.
And the people that will be in any given forum, is it like an open that anyone can join, or do you have more of a, okay, we'll use this one, this one, this one, because you have an idea from an interview? Or how does the person get to be in a
Agreed.
collective?
So we'll touch on that a little bit.
You bet. Sneezing.
Bless you. We'll touch on that a little bit because it's case dependent. And in the case of last night, we actually, it was a voluntary, like you had to apply to be a part of this group. They advertised it on LinkedIn as like, hey, do you want to explore this conversation about moral injury? So they applied and we had people from all different eras, all different branches, all different experiences. We had a guy from Delta in there, like trying to encourage some younger person in the Coast Guard to say like, don't you ever say that your experiences aren't equal to somebody else. He's like, I don't want to hear that. And so like, that's really affirming, right? For that person to be like, I should stop minimizing my experience because you've heard it from the actual person that you look up to and minimize yourself to. Please.
My very first experience with peer support was when I went through the moral injury program. I was in that pilot program. And there was a woman there who hadn't spent much time in the military. It was like days. And we got a chance to make up our group and group rules and all of these things. And we did a number of all of our combined years, and we added the days. So our years plus her days in the military. Because she thought, well, I didn't think that I had an opportunity to come to something like this, because I wasn't really.
It doesn't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why should I be feeling this way when I've never been deployed or I've never been this? And you know how it's amazing, you just see it. It's like the guy from Delta last night, that made him feel so good to encourage that other person, because oftentimes, you know, people can be put up on a pedestal and be made to feel like, oh, you've been through so much. I haven't been through all of that. But if you can take that person out of that space where they can say, you know what, my shit isn't any different from yours, like, then that also minimizes the experience that they normally have, where people almost feel sorry for them for all the trauma that they've experienced. It's growth.
So are your counselors, I think obviously they've all been through military, they all have something to offer, and they're all at different experience levels in terms of what they're able to give. So are there positions that are paid positions? For example, with the program that Captain Bell and I work in, there are a number of women who are transitioning out of the military after a number of years. The sergeant major that I've been working with for quite some time, who is looking for purpose. And she's been, you know, she's a 28-year Marine Corps veteran, you know, and she made sergeant major after 18 years in the Marines. And she held it for 11 years. Her body was still up on Quantico. You know, the term badass has been used. So I'm going to go ahead and use it today for her, because she really is. Seriously, she is one of the most impressive women I've ever met. And every time I talk to her, I feel good about having, you know, not only, you know, made an impact, but having a friend and to be active in her life, trying to help her get on her feet again.
Is that who we were talking about earlier? And so if you remember, like, I was reluctant to say there's a position within Given Hour, because even I, who's intern there there's no real designated higher position as a peer support facilitator.
Okay.
However, they do pay per session, and normally it's only once a month, so it's not something that you could do, you know, for a regular income. But I would advise, if you think that, you know, I think it's something that any veteran could benefit from, just ask her to attend. If she attends the session and says, I would love leading this, then she can become trained to lead it, and she can get a little extra pocket change.
Okay,
So-
so that's cool, and that's something that we can tell other ladies who are looking for something, not so that they can, you know, she's retired Marine for 20 years, she doesn't need it, right? She's looking for something to.
Just the purpose.
Right.
That's 100% available to her. And
Yeah,
it's
because
just, yeah,
she keeps telling me, she's like, what do I do now?
yeah.
Like, I have a nickel for every time somebody said, well, Father, what do I do now? And they just, because they've been in the military for so long.
It's a thing. Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah, you're missing, you know, it leaves a hole in your heart, that purpose. But yeah, just, we'll make sure, well, I have your card, you'll
Right.
get mine,
Okay.
give her mine.
Okay.
And we're gonna share some resources at the end too, to access things like that with Given Hour. And again, these are also levels to think about in training and skill development, because we have peer supporters who are participants in the group, and they're on that. They're starting at the same, I guess, level as anyone else, but they're still learning the way to show up in a really great way and be really great source of support for the other people in the room or in the Zoom room. And then we have peer support facilitators who get through that piece, and they get a lot of experience, and they go through post-traumatic growth, and they go through emotional growth. And when they arrive at a place that they feel safe and confident to do so, then they can learn skills about how to manage the group and not steer the conversation to control it, but steer it in a way to kind of keep everyone on track and protect the members of the group and the structure of the group. And all of that's part of this kind of formula that's on this handout that we've gotten, but it does come in levels. So in most of what we're talking about today is at that peer supporter level, which we believe that anybody who's participating can benefit from training and understanding how to show up and how to listen and how to support other people and how to show empathy. Anybody can say, oh, you need to display empathy for someone who's going through a tough time. But you might be wondering to yourself, how do you actually do that? How do I practice that? What are the steps? Give me the steps. And sometimes you don't know the steps. You just know, the word and you know the concept, but putting it into real life practice can be tough.
Yeah.
So earlier we were talking about those kind of ingredients, the things that peer support is supposed to provide. And so we also think about peer support as having pillars, so these legs to stand on. And these are the things that you need to have for peer support to be successful. And in saying successful, what I mean is effective and helpful and serving the people who are in the group. So as in these pillars, we have mutuality, which we've been talking about already, and that's really about that give and take and the reciprocity. So you're coming with a shared experience, you're willing to be open and vulnerable, and you're willing to receive other people's openness and vulnerability as well. And Given Hours is very specific about the idea of reciprocity in our approach to peer support, because we believe that that's the most effective way to kind of grow and feel, is to be leaning on each other. And then empathy, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, sure. I think if you're looking at this through a lens of how we train this model, and know that, we're doing this on active duty installation. So having these conversations with soldiers in uniform is really interesting, because we're talking about, how do you display empathy, and it'll just be like crickets, and so it's like, let me show you an example. I'm listening to somebody, they're talking about their issues, and all I have to say is like, yeah, that sounds really shitty. And I know that because so you're affirming what that person is going through is tough. It's empathy is not, suck it up. That is not empathy. That's what we're trained, how we're trained to respond, right? And so we challenge a lot of these ideas in the actual environment that they're working in, and it's just like, okay, like I understand this. So when you see that being put into practice through showing up for these groups, like it's a real job.
Yeah, and again, these other elements, empowerment and hope, is so key to the experience and for it to be an effective method of healing for individuals because, again, you're not depending on another person, another source to tell you what the fix is. And even just understanding that it's not a fix that I'm looking to, it's this journey and this process. And I can do that with the help of others, but I'm also able to do that because I'm empowered in myself and the skills that I have and the ability that I have to reframe my thinking and autonomy and do that on my own. And hope comes through that. We talk a lot about hope being kind of on a scale almost at given hour, where there's a range from a spectrum from hopelessness all the way up to hopefulness. And along that scale, you can move back and forth and you can grow in your sense of hope. And if you can do that through peer support, and that's a way to kind of motivate you to achieve those goals that you're setting for yourself, to eventually get to a point where you can give back in a way that will make you feel even more fulfilled. Kind of been talking about this a little bit already, but it's easy to say, let's just engage in peer support, and it's no problem. But there's definitely some challenges to that. Specifically in this community, it's probably these things that are here on the list. I'm going to let Rebecca speak to, but very pronounced.
Yeah. So we've kind of hammered on the fear, the stigma of what happens when someone in the military seeks help. And what I love about the peer support model is that it kind of takes that out of the equation because it's a real thing, right? And so if we're paying honor to the things that we know exist within this population, that being one of the primary things as a barrier to support, then then I think that's really what gets their foot in the door. All this stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but a lot of the same tenets of what you find in at least the Army show up in the peer support group, which is like, come on, man, if that shitbag over there can do it, you can do it. So it's like, people still like bring that element of like kind of rough around the edges to it. And it's like in their own weird twisted way, that's encouragement. That's like, it's like, I did that, you can do it. And so, that's language that we can speak, that stuff that you're already familiar with. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, so when you're doing this on an installation,
Mhm.
That container of safety that you're endeavoring to create, I mean, it's still such, unfortunately, part of military culture to tell I'm just gonna tell one person what I heard in group, and somehow it still gets
Right.
out that you're struggling with this boss or whatever. And so, how do you really
Get around that.
How do you get that?
Meaning the violation of the confidentiality of the.
Yeah. Which was my main concern, but please.
Okay, so I was gonna say, in the groups that that I have been a participant in and we lead from week to week, we talk about that in the beginning. At the very beginning, there are guidelines, there are rules. So in my particular group that I was in as a participant, we set those rules. Hey, we're not gonna talk about anything outside of this room. And typically, because of the military's values and that respect and integrity and things of those natures, people usually fall in line with those and they honor it. They don't say, okay, well, I'm gonna go tell so-and-so, because everybody's sharing these traumatic experiences. So it's a shared type of, I understand that you're going through that, and I'm not gonna say anything because I wouldn't want you saying anything about what I do.
I know that's the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you do it as an active military person, or did you do it after you were out? I'm talking about you're not a military installation.
Yeah.
And people, how people talk, and it's just.
Your concern is totally legitimate, and I had the same thing, like when we were talking about doing this at Fort Bliss, I was like, no one's gonna participate,
Nobody's gonna truly honor.
Right.
Like, there's just a chance.
But I can tell you, like, you know, when you develop the rapport, we don't ask people to share on the first day. We're there for at least 3 days. And so on like that third day, we'll like break out into groups. And what we do is we practice listening skills and sort of interviewing skills. And what we do is we allow them to speak to a partner for, I think, 3 or 4 minutes. And that partner talks about an issue, a difficult issue that they're experiencing. And we preface the exercise with, don't share anything that you don't want shared with the group, because your partner that's listening is then going to share it with the entire group. So it goes from a one-on-one conversation to the whole group now gets to know this person's stuff. And the goal of the exercise is that the person that was talking previously cannot say anything. The person that just listened will share in detail everything that they heard. And then at the end, you know, they ask that person, is that pretty much, did they get that right? Like, did they get anything wrong? Did they, you know, so it's really more just like a listening skills. We had a gal share that she just had a miscarriage like a week ago, and that she was struggling so hard with that. And so I think it becomes empowering for people to realize that I can talk about my shit, my personal life, in an environment with other people in uniform, and like, so what? I'm a person, like I have shit and they have shit. And so it starts to normalize it. But the person that's like, I don't fucking want anybody to know that shit, they're not going to open up. But I think when they see it modeled for them, it starts to normalize that process.
That's great. I agree.
Yeah, I wonder though, like, in that sense, you're probably only getting so far down into the stuff, right? Because you just said, don't share anything that you don't want shared with a whole group. So there's going to be people that are like, I'm only going to go to this layer.
Sure,
because-
it's case dependent, but we had.
Better than nothing. right?
Yeah, we had a second lieutenant. Yeah, we had a second lieutenant show up to this thing and admit to an entire room about 20 plus. It's leadership in the room too, right? Sergeant Major was in the room. So a second lieutenant admitting to the whole room that she had imposter syndrome.
Wow.
She's like, I'm new here. I feel like I'm like, don't know what I'm supposed to do, and people expect me to, and I'm an officer, and like, it was so adorable. Like, but the enlisted in the room, like, ma'am, everybody does that. Like, all of us enlisted folks, you just jump right into it, and you fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So for a new officer, right, it's everything's about image. To be able to open up and be vulnerable like that in front of a room full of people, I think speaks to that it can be done, but it's not just like an overnight fix. It's like you gotta make this a part of the normal routine, and then people start to be less anxious about that outcome.
That's why you do it over time, because over time that changes, that comfort increases, you develop your skills, and this kind of respect for the space itself as its own kind of entity develops with people. So it's you come in and there's this kind of, I'm gonna say almost like a sacredness to being in the conversation.
It's voluntary. They don't have to be there. Their command can't make them be there. So they're there on their own volition. We have hands. Go ahead.
Thanks. So as a chaplain, I tend to encourage the leadership to be vulnerable with their people, because people think that leaders have it all together, and then they wonder what's wrong with them when they don't have it together.
Right.
And so I think that's great that you guys are doing that and fostering that, because then that creates a culture.
Right.
And of course, not everybody's gonna do that. You know, there are some personalities that just, whether it's their childhood or their personality, they will not be vulnerable because it's just really hard.
Yeah.
But if the leaders can be vulnerable about them going through stuff and hearing the resources they've used. So I'm glad that you are on an installation and doing that, because it is encouraging when other people lift you up and say, hey, I went through that. That's normal, you know?
Yeah. So when leadership chooses to disclose, oh my God, it's like
Yeah.
bug eyes.
Yeah.
Like, the junior enlisted are like, what?
Yeah.
And even if they don't, the fact that they're in that room, sitting in that discomfort, which is not normal for that setting, and taking the time to listen to that person say like, okay, like it shows that it can be done.
Yeah, and also there's something to be said, because it is peer support, about the person facilitating. They're modeling it first. So usually if they're saying, I experienced this, it's traumatic, you're resonating with that, you're feeling that, you're having that empathy. it kind of opens up the room.
Mhm.
So you can kind of guide, you're not leading, you're guiding kind of the room. And so if I'm saying, I'm being vulnerable, not everybody again is not gonna open up, like you said, but some people who come are really afraid to open up.
Of course.
But there are some that, like you said, are like, I can just be my total self. I'd rather do this than open up to whoever, my spouse or whatever.
Right,
So.
because they can't.
Yeah, but that facilitator is there for a purpose to kind of guide. And it's not like you said, it's not like this is it removes that hierarchy, right? So it's like, oh, this person is on the same level as me and they are experiencing it. So it feels like I can open up and talk about it too.
And I would say furthermore, we're also bottled up because we don't do that in that environment, that when we see somebody doing it and we're like that looked like it felt good. And I actually respect that person because they said something that was honest and real. Then it starts to get those people that are like, oh, I don't fucking say anything. Like you see it, like they're like, they want to share. And by the end of the thing, people are like, hands up everywhere. And it shows
Permission.
Yeah, it shows like what a release it is for them to actually do that in uniform in that environment. And that's sorry.
It's a kind of two-part. I appreciate the sort of the, but.
Yeah.
Because there is a reality and some of that can be career ruining.
Right.
And it's just a damn reality. And also that if there is a leader that's willing to go and share, and it just takes one to drop in. So I think but I guess, so that there are levels where there may be multiple motivations to not be in a room, like with people that are, deeply lower in rank or middle, whatever. And so do you ever do peer supports that are exclusively for people who are at those very higher ranks? Because one of the complaints we hear from, fire chiefs to police chiefs to, sergeant majors and above, it's like, I don't really feel I have a peer group that I can unload, and I don't want to burden the people below me.
Right.
So do you have that?
Not yet. I
Okay.
so hope that it develops into that because it's so
Do you
needed.
think that's
For sure.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
especially if, like, in my situation, when I was dealing with all my stuff, I'm the rater for everybody
There you
that
go.
works for me.
There you go.
And I
So-
can't have a vulnerable conversation.
Yes.
So, because then they're like, well, she was fucking off a rocker when she wrote my evaluation, you know what I mean?
Because I heard her in the chat.
Right.
Totally get it.
Please go.
So as a chaplain, so I've been a lead chaplain at a TR unit, so it's leadership and staff meetings and stuff. So I would be vulnerable with people about things that were going on in my life. And I didn't share gory details or anything like that. And acknowledging, validating that this stuff is hard and stuff. So it gave them, if the chaplain is going through this, then maybe I can share some stuff. So it gave them an out to come talk to me. But I'm not saying that you share all the details, but I've seen leaders that will speak in front of a crowd and say, I don't have all my ducks in a row. At times, and this is going on. I've had a time where I've had to deal with my family stuff, and these are the resources that I've used, but they didn't go into detail. It's not like your safe space, but it's an acknowledgement and a validation that life is hard. And I understand that you're going through hard stuff, and I care about you, and I want you to get the help that you need.
And I can do that for the whole day long.
Yeah.
But
And I think that's two different things.
right,
Yeah.
but to share the details.
Right, yeah. I'm calling you hard.
I know we have 7 minutes left, but we won't get through everything, but maybe we can just keep going. Did you have something?
Me, no.
Oh, what about you, Dan?
No, I was just gonna say, I talked to the chief of staff of Fort Scum, and great guy. He was a little vulnerable with a whole group of chaplains and religious affairs NCOs about some of the struggles he had been through, health, financial. He didn't give the details, but it was just very real, very humbling. And you immediately felt like, I love this guy. And
Exactly. Who's gonna work harder for you?
right.
The
So,
person that's in it with you.
right.
Yeah.
So I talked to him afterwards and I said, I think there are a lot of senior leaders walking around with a huge rucksack of burdens they can barely carry because they don't think they can talk to anybody about it, even chaplains, because they have to be the leader with all the answers. He said, you're 100% correct.
Yeah,
His peers are all walking around with all this crap that they don't, feel that they can unload.
right.
Because they've been taught that they have to have all the answers.
They're the ones that have the
Yeah.
answers. They have to stay
Yeah.
strong, but I can,
But it's destroying their soul.
100%. Yeah, it doesn't have to get that personal, right? The sergeant major in the room did disclose to the rest of that, and so these PV2s and spec 4s, they're like, and he says, what the hardest part of my job is seeing you guys struggling. And you won't go to, if you're having an issue, you won't go to your leadership. And then the problem gets so big to where it gets to the point up to my level. And all I'm thinking is, why won't you just trust each other? Like, why won't we talk to each other? And so it's not that he's saying I've got all this stuff, but like to be able to be honest and vulnerable for a second and say like, what's really hard about my job, and for the younger folks to get to see that out, at your level, I think that just helps to see it all from all angles. Yeah.
And these things can be built into the group as well. And that's part of it, on the sheets you've got, there's this kind of process or formula of setting up a group. And there's all of these different milestones where you come to and say, okay, now I'm going to think about who is the person that would benefit from this group? How do we want to set up that parameter? Do we have a definition? Is there a screening process? What kind of culture they come into the group? So you can kind of take those concerns and for each individual group, you can build it into the structure. So you can create it from the beginning. You start at the outset in that first meeting of the first group, talking about community agreements. Like, this is how we're going to carry ourselves in this group. This is how we're going to interact and exchange and connect. And it's not that it's not controlling. It's not meant to be, where you have a tight hold, but it's meant to kind of keep this integrity around what the intention of the group is, so that people can have the experience and the benefit that you're hoping for that specific population at that moment in time people were in.
So I want to just validate with the senior leaders, they're competing against each other. So they don't want to share with each other because they're worried if that gets out to you.
Right.
So like, as you guys think about how you can support senior leaders, I don't know if you can bring in, like do a Zoom and bring in leaders from other branches, and you know what I mean? So
it's not quite as incestuous.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that was.
Well, like, I feel like I could do it now that I'm out, but like
Right.
my peers, there was 54, they were also my competition. I didn't view them as competition, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But some do, they really do see each other, because you're acting stacked against each other.
Yeah.
So I actually got brought by my brigade commander to share. I mean, I'd already decided I was gonna retire, and I was totally vulnerable and bawled in front of all these new professors of military science. I had several reach out to me afterwards saying, thank you, I have been going crazy, la, la, la. But it was because I was no longer a threat. And I knew it, and my brigade commander knew it, and he's like, because I was sharing with him, I was like, I gotta be done, so let me just play what's up.
Yeah.
So
So how comfortable you come on the way out.
Right, I'm comfortable being that person, but I'm also saying like.
Yeah.
We have to be situational where, we don't want to go over. So what's the most important for the last 2 minutes?
How do we get trained?
givenhour.org.
Okay.
So, and again, we're talking about these as products because they're kind of, it's a training mechanism, but these are things that GivenHour does offer an opportunity to learn how to be a great peer supporter. And then through other levels of learning and some eventuality, then there is a facilitator training level as well. So kind of elevated skills and being in a mind space to be able to take on a role like that. So we can do training like that. And we can help you learn how to really build a group from the ground up. The structure is on these papers too. It's kind of like a formula or instructions, but it's not so easy to just completely digest that. So there's resources for that with us. And then we also have active peer support groups that you can join. They're virtual, they're national, you can be anywhere. they're drop-in style, and so these are the populations that we're currently serving with peer support. And sometimes that changes based on different projects that we're undertaking. But if you see that web page below, there's a lot more about what the peer support experience is going to be like for the participant. You can jump into these if you feel you need them. I think it's really important to service the outer circle too for the individuals. So that's why we have family and loved one support groups for some of these populations as well, because they're affected by that experience. They're also contributing to the recovery and healing of the person who's in the group too.
Yeah, I think my closing thought is that, as a provider, you can see this as a tool for you, right? Because at some point in time, there comes an end to that, relationship, or more than often it does. And so a lot of times I think it's difficult to figure out what is the next steps for that person. This doesn't have to be goodbye forever by no means, but in the meantime, a good way for you to stay kind of more resilient and keep on continuing in the work the progress that you've made. I think a good idea for you would be to join a peer support group, maybe talk about what you've gained and maybe share your experiences, because I think you're at that next level. I think when you encourage that person to say, I think what you've gone through can benefit somebody else, and you're at that level now where you're ready to share that, is even as further empowering to that person to say, like, you know what, I am ready. Like, let me give this a try. So.
And I'll just end with saying it is a continuous learning. Think of it as continuous learning at every level. You're learning how to participate. You're learning how to be a great supporter. You're learning how to facilitate. You're learning about things that could be better about it. And then you're learning more about self-reflection. You can start that cycle all over again at different stages. So it's not that we ever want to stop thinking. We don't even want to think that we stopped learning. So there's always more that we can take in, more that we could do. It's something we push ourselves to accomplish beyond what we just did. So it never really ends.
We sell it as leadership development. And that's the buy-in we get from active duty. They're like, okay, we're like, this is going to make you a better leader. Like, so, and we also give Army Community Service hours for those who go through the peer support program, so they can actually, like, it's incentivizing to them. So we're doing, all the things we can to make this more of a broadly utilized thing.
Spark. Thank you for all the slides you did. Yes,
We'll provide this.
I mean, I'd love to get your feedback on this, because we also want to know, from the conversation that we've had today, what other things, would be helpful in these types of conversations, so that we can make sure that they're incorporated. Because we're always trying to learn more too about what the needs are and how to serve that.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.